Hello, I'm Audra and welcome to the Sallie Tomato YouTube channel. Today, we're gonna make a bag great for any evening outing. And if you're like me and love a great last minute sew, this can be made in an afternoon to go with any outfit. Welcome to the Sallie Tomato YouTube channel. If you're new to sewing or like sewing fashion-forward bags and accessories, our YouTube channel is a place for you to create confidently. The Olivia bag is an on-trend, not style handbag, just large enough to fit all your essentials. This tutorial applies a few apparel sewing techniques to bag making in an approachable way. It also provides its own closure without any hardware by one handle slipping over the other to keep the pouch closed. This pattern can be made for any occasion from casual to formal, depending on your fabrics. The finished size is 7 inches wide by 8.5 inches tall and 2 inches deep. For this pattern, I was inspired by Olivia Pope from the TV show Scandal. Her style was always classic with a bit of an edge. I felt this style of handbag would be just the kind of handbag she would wear out on a night in Washington, D.C. All patterns can be found at sallietomato.com. Before we get started, be sure to grab the pattern. See the description below this video and follow the link to access the pattern information. All of the supplies you need are listed on the back of the pattern. This project is specifically suited for woven fabrics. The Olivia bag can be made out of quilt cottons, linen, canvas, velveteen, satin, or sequins. So once you decide your fabrics, gather your supplies, cut out your fabrics according to the pattern, and let's get started. The first step in our pattern is to fuse interfacing to the coordinating pieces. If you're using sequins fabric, we will be fusing the interfacing to the lining pieces. You can see here, I have already fused interfacing to the wrong side of my lining fabric and cut them according to the templates. On the wrong side of each piece A, both exterior and lining pieces, center and trace the shaping template along the top short edge. An easy way to find the center of piece A is to fold piece A in half along the short edge and also fold your template in half to create a crease. I'm using the Sew Magnetic cutting system by Tites. This cutting system works great, especially with slippery fabrics like sequins, or anytime you have something you want to make sure doesn't shift while cutting. These Tites magnets are really great in this cutting system that Tites has developed. It allows for precision cutting, especially with slippery fabrics, or if you have any type of arthritis, it really allows you to make sure that everything is going to stay where it's supposed to be and you don't have to press as hard. We are now going to cut our exterior piece according to the templates included in the pattern. You can see how great it is. I've got it all secured down and nothing is shifting on me. So you can see I secured my fabric in place with the Tites system and I was able to easily cut those curves without anything shifting. With right sides together, align all edges, main pieces A, and sew together along the top short ends. I'm going to be chain piecing these sections of the pattern. I find it's just quicker to sew them at the same time and then I can snip in between. Repeat this step for lining pieces A. And press all seams open. If you are using sequin fabric, we recommend using a seam roller. We're gonna use our Modern American Vintage seam roller. We love Chris's products and especially love this one because it is Sallie Tomato purple. With main and lining right sides together, align all edges, including the center hole. When I'm clipping the center hole, the first place I start is at the shoulder seams that I just sewed. I line up the seams from the main and the lining fabric, and then I will clip the rest of the hole from there. When sewing with a fabric that tends to be more slippery like sequins, don't be afraid to overpin or overclip. You'd rather have that fabric secured than have things moving around on you. Sew together the center hole with a 1/4 inch seam allowance following the edges. Cut small nips into the seam allowance curves. Clip only the lining if using sequins as a main fabric. When I clip the curves, I only primarily worry about the most curved part of the hole. I don't worry about the straight sections in the middle. Push pieces A through the center hole and place fabrics wrong sides together. When working the fabrics to right side out, sometimes, especially again with a slipperier fabric, I will clip just to kind of help the fabric kind of get set in place as I work my way around, and then I can press and seam roll to kind of just lock that in. As an optional step, move the main fabric away from the seam, then top stitch 1/8 inch from the seam on the right side of the lining, securing the seam allowances. When top stitching the lining, or also known as understitching, you will be sewing on the lining side of the fabric on the pressed side of the seam. If you're familiar with apparel sewing, this technique is also called understitching. I take my time on this step to ensure I don't get any of the main exterior fabric wrapped up into this seam. Another trick is, as you can see, I have my thumb underneath my fabric with my fingers on top, which allows me to feel that that fabric is folded towards the lining and going the direction in which I want. We will now move on to completing the handles. With the main bag right side up, fold one long lining handle outer edge of the lining to the right side along the center hole seam. Note that the lining right side of the handle will be visible through the center hole in this step. Roll the opposite aligned long edge of the bag toward and then over the center hole until the open main lining handle is right sides together. Similar to the beginning when I aligned the shoulder handles together, I'm also going to align this seam, the center shoulder seam, as one of my very first when clipping at this stage. For those who might be familiar, this is a similar approach as to when we make pillowcases, and it's called the burrito method. We are just applying it to bag making. Sew the handle cutout with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure that in your 1/4 inch seam allowance, you do not have any of the rolled up section clipped in there. As I'm sewing this section, you can see my left forefinger is touching the rolled up inside to ensure that it doesn't get caught up in my seam allowance. Gently pull the project through the sewn handle and then one open end. When pulling through your burrito for your bag, note that especially when using like sequins, it can kind of get caught on some of those little beads. So it might be more of like a gentle yank, but just be patient and just work it through. It will come through, I promise. I now am going to repeat the same sewing process for the second handle. When pulling your fabric through, it might start to bunch up on you a little bit and feel a little bit finger trap style. Just go slow, pull the fabric through gently and slowly. When you're pulling, definitely pull on the stronger of your two fabrics if you're sewing with a fabric like sequins or lace or something like that. So I would pull on the interfaced cotton versus pulling on the sequins. Again, just go slow, be patient, it will come through. Now we will be assembling the Olivia bag. Cut out 1-inch squares from each bottom corner of main and lining pieces. Note, the test square size in your pattern makes a perfect template for this. Fold the bag with main fabric right sides together and lining fabric right sides together, matching seams and aligning raw edges. When I do this step, I will always pin my seams together first and then my edges and work from the end. To save time, I've gone ahead and clipped both sides so I can sew them both while sitting down at the machine. Sew side edges, beginning with a 1/4 inch seam allowance on the main bag, then increasing to a 3/8 inch seam allowance along the lining side edges. Make sure you keep the handles out of the seams. Sew bottom of main bag with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Sew bottom of lining with 3/8 inch seam allowance, leaving an opening for turning. With main bag right sides together, at each corner, match the side and bottom seams. When I'm doing my box corners, I will ensure that my seams nest nicely, meaning that my seam allowance folds one direction and the other direction so they sit nicely inside of one another. Sew together with 1/4 inch seam allowance to box the corners. Repeat this step also for the lining. Turn the bag right side out by pushing main and lining through the unsewn section of the lining. The final step of your bag is to top stitch or hand sew the lining open and closed with an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Smooth your lining down into your bag, shaping the corners and seam edges. An optional last step is to top stitch all handle seam edges. I hope you enjoyed making the Olivia pattern. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to let us know. Please share and show off your photos of your completed project. We'd love to see your style. Use the hashtags Sallie Tomato and hashtag Olivia bag on social media so we can see it. Thanks for watching. I hope you'll check out the rest of our pattern line for other creative projects. Thanks for sewing with me today.